Guitar Business Radio is the podcast for the business of guitar, where you'll always get no reviews, no demos, and no idle chatter. From players to CEOs and in between. If you have a professional or business connection to the world of guitar, this show is your window to insight and information you won't get anywhere else. I'm Jeffrey D. Brown, and I approve this message. So let's get to it. From Guitar Business Media, this is episode 32 of GBR. Welcome back to the show that has absolutely no political agenda. What a concept. In fact, the only agenda we have is to bring you high-value programming from a business perspective in the world of guitar. The truth is, we're the only guitar-centric business media outlet of its kind. And that's what we mean when we say you won't get this anywhere else. And today's show is no exception. You know, I started in this business at the end of the 70s, as a youngster, of course, But even earlier, as a teenager growing up with a guitar, the most important magazine on the planet was Guitar Player. And I think I actually placed the first of many ads in GP around about 1978 or so, promoting the only commercial album that the great guitarist and teacher Ted Green ever recorded, called Solo Guitar, which the company I was a partner in at that time, PMP, produced and released. I remember it well. Sort of, kind of, maybe. Well, a lot has happened over the last 40 years, and today we're going to be getting an inside look at more than half of those years in a GBR exclusive hour-long interview with Guitar Player magazine's former editor, Michael Molenda, who held that position for 21 years until it all came to a screeching halt a few months ago after the parent company was sold. Now, in his first in-depth interview since all this went down, Mike tells us what happened, but also talks about how it all got started, and much more, including the milestones and challenges along the way. It's a thoughtful and revealing interview, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But first, a quick note about two projects from Guitar Business Media that we've been telling you about. And if you like the approach we're taking on GBR, we think you'll also like what we're doing with Guitar Business Daily, launching a little bit later this fall, and Guitar Business Magazine, which will show up early next year. Now, essentially, we're taking our mission here on GBR and expanding it dramatically into two new digital properties. Guitar Business Daily will offer a wide range of relevant and useful and engaging content covering the business of guitar as we've previously defined it. You know, guitar players to guitar builders, CEOs to entrepreneurs, and everything in between. It's called Daily because it will be updated in real time, whereas the magazine is a bi-monthly edition with unique and sustainable content designed to have a long shelf life. There will be some special print versions of the magazine, and we'll tell you more about that at a later date. In the meantime, you can preview all the action at the web address that says it all, guitar.business. That's all you need to know. Guitar.business. And by the way, there's a number of editorial contributor opportunities. If that's something you're interested in, you can let us know right on the website. And while we're waiting for you to get in touch with us, let's do something completely different. So Michael Molenda got his start in the publishing world at the start of the 90s after a decade as a working musician. He made a big impact as editor of Electronic Musician magazine until around 1997 when he joined Guitar Player as editor-in-chief. Well, the rest is history, and I think we'll just let him fill in all the blanks as Michael Molenda joins us right here and right now. Well, Mike, thanks so much for coming on the show with us and joining us here on GBR. It's great to have you.
Yeah, it sounds fun. I don't know what you're going to do. It seems weird to have a guitar player and editor on a business show, but I'm taking a shot here.
Well, you've been in the business. You've been around the business. You've definitely been involved in it in so many ways. But we always start off with some historical significance, and let's find out what were some of the things, in your earlier years, however you would define that, some of those things that really had an impact on your career later in life. Usually everybody's got at least one of those things that they can remember. How about you?
Well, a couple. I always kept notebooks and loved comic books when I was a kid. So I kind of knew that writing was going to be in my future at some point. And I had a pretty decent imagination. Sometimes it got me in trouble when I tried to lie my way out of various predicaments. So that seemed to be in the future. And also, like many people you've talked to, seeing the Beatles on TV in 1964 on the Ed Sullivan Show and having my dad call them talentless girls. And then I kind of realized, well, if he's huffed out about this is probably the direction I want to go. Also, just figuring out girls and all that, and just seeing the screaming, and I think that appealed to me. I think later on the music probably came into it, but just the idea of being whatever those four guys were, because I really didn't get it at the time I saw it, but I just knew it was something that affected me deeply. And as I progressed and found out about other bands, the Kinks, the Who, Led Zeppelin, whatever, you start to realize that, oh, these people are making music. So I had to figure out all about that. And once I figured that out, it was like, okay, I am fully in. This is the most awesome thing anybody could ever do in their entire life. Of course, that's a kid talking. You realize later on that this could be the worst decision you ever made to become a professional musician.
Yeah, I'm sure that a lot of people, well, I mean, I suspect that there was a time that I had that. I probably had that into my 20s, and I sort of made the decision in the 70s that that probably was not going to be my career. So I always sort of call myself the least known non-working guitar player on the planet, which is a title I can live with. But
that's an awesome title, though.
I mean, maybe it's a book title. I don't know. I don't know.
I want a title. I want a title.
I mean, I have a lot of titles. I can make them up and have 10 or 12 different email addresses and throw up a website in a half a day, and I'm in business. But not to get sidetracked. In your teenage years, I mean, were you playing? When did you really start playing and getting going with it?
Back in my day, it was tough to do that because my dad wanted nothing to do with it because I was going to turn into a drug addict, of course. And we lived in San Francisco, so the Haight-Ashbury was virtually down the block. So he wasn't really down with the hippies and the long hair and all that. So it was difficult to say to him, I want to play guitar. My mom was supporting me, but at that time, the first guitar teacher she got me was like, I don't know, an 175-year-old Swedish woman who wanted me to play Old Lang Syne and stuff like that. And when I brought her some Beatles sheet music, she proceeded to put it on her piano and correct the notes. Like, this can't be right. And so it took a while. I think a lot of people in my age group, you really had to struggle to figure out what tools do I need? Where do I learn this stuff? And how do I get there? Yeah. And it put me off for a while. I really didn't play much through high school, so I guess I'm kind of a late starter. It wasn't until late high school and early college where other friends of mine started getting into bands, and I could use them as mentors and really start to understand what it takes to put a show together, what it takes to play guitar the way you're supposed to play guitar, what it takes to reach out to an audience and make them like you, hopefully. I mean, I learned all that stuff on the job, so to speak.
Well, most people, or many people do. I would say most people do because that's how we do learn it. You know, you got to get the job, and then you got to learn the job. So,
true. But it's funny now because I'll sit there, man, if only I could have taken a YouTube video back in 72 and gone, so that's how you're supposed to play an A bar chord with a flatted ninth? I mean, I would have been in, or I could slow down B.B. King's licks and figure it out. I would have been in heaven.
Yeah, I mean, it's way different, as it should be. I mean, in the resources that we have available to, it's almost overwhelming. I sometimes, and I'm in the thick of all this, and I can easily get overwhelmed by everything that there is, because it's just a candy store, Sure.
But I also appreciate the fact that wasn't available to me, because if I was trying to get something out of Pete Townsend or Eric Clapton or Mick Ronson, I would invariably rip it off wrong because my ears weren't that awesome. And I think that helped me find my own style because I wasn't able to figure out what they were really doing. Yeah. So I do appreciate the fact that struggle ultimately led to a more Mike style of guitar playing, for whatever that means.
So how did that progress? I'm not sure what the timeline is here, but you're you finished whatever time you were spending in school and you got into the real world somehow? And
well, I got a degree in journalism from San Francisco State. I also got a master's in English, romantic poetry. Try getting a job with that unless you want to be a teacher. But if ever you want to discuss Lord Byron with me, I can grab a coffee and we can talk. But
maybe sometime in the next century.
Yeah, but we really don't want to talk about John Keats then.
No.
But anyway, so I went the journalism route first and got some jobs in local newspapers. And then the band I was in that was doing original music, just by a fluke, had a German company pick up on a flexi disc that we did. Remember those?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Used to find them in cereal boxes and stuff like that.
I think we put some in books. Is it the same kind of thing? We put them in some guitar books that we did back in the 70s.
Yeah, Guitar Player magazine actually has a whole library of them. I didn't realize that existed at the time. I just couldn't afford to print on vinyl, so that was my option. Yeah. And a German label picked up on it. Who knows how that happened? They wanted us to keep writing music for them. It was Taxum, which was based in Bremen, Germany. And at that point, I was off to the races. I was a pro musician, making royalties and all that other stuff.
Nice. So okay.
It was all kind of, it was what I wanted to have happen, but I can't say that I planned it. It was pretty much just falling into a toy box.
Yeah. Were you able to make a living doing that?
Yes, absolutely.
So that progressed for quite a while. If I understand your timeline in a rough sort of way, it sounds like, was that about a decade's worth of work or so before you really made the transition into the publishing world? Yeah,
about 89, 90, I opened a studio with a high school friend of mine, recording studio in San Francisco. And it wasn't as awesome as I thought it was going to be. I had a hard time working with bands who just didn't seem to be able to get it together. There was a lot of work. There was some awesome parts of it too. It's great learning things from people and having a bunch of bands come in and build a community up around that. But I guess I was complaining about it just a little bit too much. And my first wife one day at the breakfast table said, you've got a degree in journalism. I'm reading the want ads. There's this magazine called Electronic Musician over in the East Bay. Why don't you just stop the whining and apply for this job and do something else? You could keep the studio, but you got to be happy. And I went, okay. So I walked in there, and like sometimes happens that, I was an arrogant fool, a jerk, and just went, well, these guys, because Mix Magazine was also in the same building, and I had adored Mix and didn't know much about electronic musician. And I just walked in there and went, well, these guys aren't real musicians or decent musicians. These are just boho journalists writing about stuff, blah, blah, blah. And I guess a couple of days later, one of the editors there knocked on the door of my studio and said, the magazine's been kind of a DIY computer magazine. We realized that the home studio market is starting to bubble up. We really think that you'd be an asset to the team, but you got to quit being a jerk and just say you want the job. And I kind of went, all right, I've been an arrogant putz. Maybe I should do something with my journalism degree. Maybe this would be a good move. So I said, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm going to take this. And it was, thank goodness, one of the best decisions I made in my life, because it led to so much awesome stuff. It's hard to even quantify the bliss that happened with me just deciding to put my own ego aside and do something great. It was an awesome opportunity for me. And I found out that I did love teaching other people how to do stuff in the studio, and the home recording market did explode, and we were right at the front of it. So it made the electronic musician team at that time look like we were so progressive and had the heartbeat of where musicians were going. At the expense of Mix, which of course was a higher end magazine, and they were always kind of looking down on us. But ultimately, it was like, no, I'm sorry. The inmates are running the asylum now, and Electronic Musician is the magazine you need to follow if you want to know how to use all these cheaper, more wonderful home studio tools.
So the position that you came in at was?
An assistant editor.
Okay, an assistant editor. And did you feel good about the culture there? It sounds like you did. Was it a good environment?
Yeah, it was in an old jelly bean factory in Emeryville, California. So there was a lot of light. The staff was delightful. The people were great. It was just I couldn't believe I walked in there for the interview being as antagonistic as I was, because everybody was just beautiful to me, and I was kind of embarrassed about starting off on the wrong foot, really.
You said something that just flashed on me. It's quite a while, but right about that time, this is right about the beginning of the 90s, 90, 91 or so, and you said Emeryville.
Yeah.
The funny thing about that was when I made the switch from the agency side and went to work in the magazine business, went to work for a company called Computer Currents. It was a street magazine. It was like Micro Times at the time.
I remember that, yeah.
And they were in Emeryville.
Oh,
and
awesome.
It was kind of an industrial sort of building that they were in. And
well, you probably had some dangerous lunches at Rodoni's bar then, I'm sure.
It could be, but boy, I'd have to really search the archives of my memory to figure that out. But I did make some trips up there for sure. I mostly worked down here in the LA area. But that was an interesting time. That was kind of like you. I was still at that point relatively new to the magazine business and rose fairly rapidly. I was a publisher or so within about a year. But
wow.
But interesting times. Well, I don't want to digress too far, but now, did your position change while you were there at all? Did you move up the ladder at all? Or?
Yeah, Bob O'Donnell was the editor-in-chief, and I think he lasted a year or maybe a little bit more than a year while I was there. And then he decided to do something else, and I became editor-in-chief pretty quickly, about the same as you, about a year or a year and a half. And at that point, Bob was a great editor, but more of a computer MIDI type of a guy. And as soon as I had the reins, I immediately wanted to change it over to digital recording, home recording, more emphasis on microphones, recording techniques, and really go after the home recording space. Because, I'd been a musician for so long getting my hands slapped in commercial studios. Don't touch that knob, don't do that. And I kind of had to build my own studio to figure out, to basically be able to to turn a knob. It cost me, tens of thousands of dollars to finally be able to go through, find my own destiny through this thing. And I was really hot to share this knowledge with people like me, musicians who had their own ideas about how a record should sound or how their song should sound, and to be able to take control of that and not have a studio engineer or a producer go, nah, can't do that. Nah, that's wrong. To me, I was always like, what's wrong? I don't know if there is a wrong. There's a commercial, of course. You can certainly, go so far from having a hit record, it's not even funny. But as far as creating music, I just didn't believe in the rule book.
That's probably a good thing, right?
Well, it
has its place.
Yeah. Sometimes tossing the rule book can be a bad thing.
Yeah, it's all depends on the circumstance, I guess. But so it sounds like you made some changes. You shifted the direction of the magazine. Was it noticeable? Did people respond? Or
well, it was a perfect storm of opportunity because a lot of the manufacturers were finally really good condenser mics were coming under the $1,000 price point. There was a lot of digital recorders coming to the fore that were affordable. Things that cost $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $100,000 a few years ago were now affordable. Alesis came out with the ADAT, which was the first time really that a musician could afford a digital recording machine. So, and a lot of the rest of the business was, kind of surrounding that. Oh, we need to make cheaper microphones, or we need to make, better tools, all the way from, windscreens to signal processors. It all came around this idea of a person at home being able to afford to have a professional quality studio and make music, basically be able to take a record from concept to playback system all their own. So the industry was moving toward that. So all of a sudden, we just got tons of advertising from manufacturers. And it was like, wow, we basically exploded.
So you really you opened up the market for your own business, right?
Well, the market was happening, but we were the magazine that really went, okay, we're all in behind you, Mr. and Mrs. Manufacturer, who are making tools for this community.
Yeah, like at the right place at the right time.
Absolutely.
Wow.
So, I mean, you can't write that script. I just,
no,
you know,
I mean,
I was just so lucky. It was crazy.
That's what you look for. And believe me, I know plenty of people, and I've probably experienced it myself too, where, you know, that's what you want, and you really, really work toward trying to get it, and it doesn't happen.
Sure.
You know, and I would suggest that has to do with trying a little too hard and staying on too narrow of a path. With very narrow expectations and not allowing the window of options to open up. So that's a whole different discussion, but it sounds like that worked pretty well. Now, that went on for quite a while, for what, 6-7 years or so? Or
yeah, 7 years. And I was happy there, and the magazine was still doing extremely well, still growing. But I was approached by the publishers of Guitar Player, Ed Senstack and Ross Garnick, who Guitar Player was having a bit of a slide, both I think in ad revenue, reputation, and relationship with advertisers at that point. So they were concerned, and they had seen that I was able to grow this electronic musician. Certainly it wasn't me that was growing it. It was a whole staff of people and ad people and editors helping that happen. But as kind of the face of the magazine, I got a lot of the spotlight for that.
Now, I know Ed from many years ago, and I'm trying to remember, was he the publisher or the editor?
He was the publisher,
okay,
and
right.
Ross Garnick was the associate
That's
publisher.
right, okay, yeah. I haven't.
Yeah. So they reached out to me, and I took a meeting with the staff, which was scary because, well, first off, I should say that Guitar Player had always been in my guitar case all the way from to my local music store. So when they reached out, it was like, how can you say no, right?
Of course.
This is a dream. But the day before the big interview, my first wife, who was a ballet dancer, told me, hey, you know what? I don't want to be married anymore. So I walked into the interview feeling like a freight train had run over me because I did not see that coming.
Oh, man.
Everything about our marriage had been like laughs and coolness, until that very moment.
So you're just caught off guard?
I was caught off guard, and I was sitting there, and they did want me, but I told Ed and Ross, it's like, I think I'm going to be going through a divorce, which indeed happened. And I don't know if I want to go through a divorce and change my job all at the same time. That seems like a lot of stuff. So I chickened out of the GP job. They took Richard Johnston, who was actually a bass player, and put him in the guitar player's seat for a while. And Richard was an awesome editor and, just really good and smart in a lot of ways. But I think that a year went by and they wanted to move him over to Bass Player magazine, which made sense because he was a fantastic bass player. Yeah. And the guitar player seat would be open again. And at that time I went, well, I'm not going to fumble this ball twice. So I said, yes, please have me.
So they came after you again?
They were so nice to still want me on the gig. I can't thank Ed and Ross enough for once again making my life an awesome thing. And
did they bring you on as an editor or something other?
Top spot, editor in chief.
So you walked right into that, and we'll talk more about the expanse of that, which many years, but you held that position ultimately for many, many years.
Yeah, 21.
Yeah. What we talked the other day, and I was again thinking about it, doing the dates and stuff like that. And it sounds to me, I suspect that we were both working for the same company, you and I, Miller Freeman, at some point in the mix there. Were they the owners of the magazine at the time you came on? Or
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And they still were when they bought our company. In spring of 1999, and I remember that Vicki came in and wanted to make sure that somehow she knew I was a guitar guy. And she said, well, I want to make sure that you get a subscription to Guitar Player. So I did. I had a free subscription to Guitar Player until they 86'd all of us a year and a half later.
Well, at least you got a free prescription for a little while.
I did, and I think it actually lasted during my severance period too, as well. And after that, it went away. I didn't get it. But that's an interesting thing to have in common. So I want to talk, this is kind of the meat and potatoes. You did this for a long time. I wanted to ask you a little bit about the company culture when you started there. What was that like? Did it change down the road? I don't want to get too far ahead of the skis, but how did you feel about things in the early days that you were there?
Well, I actually love Miller Freeman. I never had a problem with the corporate parents of EM. Matter of fact, Norman Lear owned the magazine, so that was kind of cool. The guy that did All in the Family and all that.
Of course.
But when I got to Miller Freeman, the human resources was fine. There was a lot of opportunity. There was a lot of money coming in, so there wasn't like a lot of worries about who's going to pay the rent. So it was a extremely nurturing and happy existence. The staff of Guitar Player, for the most part, viewed me as a boring interloper who did this computer recording magazine who didn't really deserve to be there.
Oh, okay.
So that was a little bit tough. And I also recognized that the culture was that certain people were only certain people could do cover stories. Other people were said, well, you're the lesson person or you're the gear person. And I immediately turned it into like a socialist nation almost and said, now anybody can do anything. We're not going to have these silos where only certain people deserve to do a cover story or whatever. If someone's got a good idea or feels that they are more appropriate for a cover story, then they should be able to do it. That didn't go down very well initially.
Oh, okay. I can imagine.
But I've always worked that way, where I like collaborative environments where everybody has equal say, and that allowed me to get Art Thompson, who was an awesome editor, out of the gear silo and actually do some amazing artist interviews with people he was interested in, to get Andy Ellis, who was a brilliant lessons editor, but also a brilliant guitar player and a brilliant historian of guitar, to do artist interviews as well. It just seemed like, why are these guys not allowed to do cover stories? Mm-hmm. They're brilliant writers.
Yeah, that's pretty dramatic. And what was the effect of that? Did that have a positive effect that could be, what was measurable in any way? Did you see that the benefit of that?
It was a little bumpy at first. Jazz Aubrick, who I think we had a good relationship while we were both working there, but he was the top dog. He'd been there forever and an awesome writer. It was going to go down and as one of the main reasons Guitar Player was where it was. His interviews are pretty legendary, but he decided he wanted to leave. Didn't confront me personally about it or anything. James Rotundi, who was also an amazing guitar player, an amazing writer. When Jazz left, he decided he didn't want to be there anymore. So it really was, I don't know if Ed or Ross expected me to clean house like that. I certainly didn't expect to clean house walking in, but it kind of turned out that way. And we were able to, get different people into the mix and start to repair the magazine's reputation. And also, I should say, too, that one of the things I did when I walked in is I immediately redesigned the magazine in 1 month. I think we have to reach out, have a front section that offers, bit-sized information to people. We need to treat things differently because we basically are an educational magazine helping other guitar players realize their dreams. And I have to say that nobody, the old guard, the new guard, nobody fought me on that. Everybody was completely supportive. And within 1 month, we had a brand new Guitar Player magazine.
How did that go over in the market? Was that well received or what? Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. You always got a group of people say, oh, no, I like the old one. Oh, I love the new one. It's like...
Yeah, well, I didn't pay that much attention to the business side at that point, but I do know that our circulation was around 80,000 at that point, and in not even a year, we were back up to way over 100,000 and growing.
Well, that's measurable.
Ross and Ed were happy about the relationships with the advertisers. The ads started coming back. The books started getting thicker. I think the first issue that we redesigned was February of 98. And I think by December of 98, we had something like a 214-page issue, going up from issues that were, in the 160s or 170. So there was a measurable benefit to the direction that we all had decided to take.
So that must have felt fairly good. I wanted to ask you a little bit about some of the, because you had a 21-year stint there. I'm sure you had some accomplishments that you're proud of. What else stands out along that timeline that you would say that you're proud of, that you made a difference? Anything else stand out?
It's hard for me to look at stuff that way because it's hard for me to turn around and go, oh, there's my little treasure box of proudness.
And that's, of course, why I asked the question, but it was my goal to trip you up.
Yeah. Well,
not really.
I like the fact that I was able to bring on and mentor in any way I could so many amazing writers, Matt Blackett, Darren Fox, Jude Gold. There's so many, I don't even want to leave any out, so I should probably stop there because I'll end up forgetting somebody important. But but that was awesome because I really feel like we were a little gang of people who loved guitar and guitarists, and I think that enthusiasm beamed off the page and became more than just data. People knew, and was also able to get an event going called Guitar Players Guitar Superstar, which brought in 10 guitarists from all across the world who auditioned for the honor to kind of go at the Great American Music Hall in San Francisco. Although we had the first one actually at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
I think I remember those.
Yeah. And in Cleveland. And that was just amazing because not only could we reach out to the community, but we could also give something back. Like we had all these players come in, audition, somebody won. That actually meant something in the business world because I would see the winners get endorsement deals and things like that, or watch their own career grow because of it. So I guess if I had to be proud of anything, it would probably be that, because that had so many resonances throughout the guitar community.
Yeah. Let me go to the flip side a little bit. This was always, of course, designed to make everybody uncomfortable, but I don't think it really does or should. Were there any downturns or challenges that caused you or your colleagues any grief? And I'm not necessarily talking about, well, this guy was a jerk and made life miserable for people, but sometimes things happen in the industry, things happen to the business, all kinds of things. Was there anything along the way that really became a challenge for you that you had to deal with and overcome?
Well, sure. I would say the disruptions in the publishing industry were huge. I had maybe 10 years, I guess, or maybe a little less, where everything seemed wonderful. And then revenues started trending downward. The whole landscape of publishing changed. And a print magazine that didn't have a robust website or a social network was in trouble. I mean, we did. I think we came to the party a little bit late, and I don't think that I was frustrated that I don't believe the parent companies invested enough in digital media to really make a difference.
A lot of people were slow to. I mean, I was involved with several companies that were just very slow to embrace it, and most of us couldn't really understand why. I mean, what's the thinking? Some people were so entrenched in that old school. I mean, they grew up in print media. I mean, I did for sure, but I think I successfully made the transition. But others didn't. And some people just don't adapt to change very well. And if you really go down to the core of it, that's usually what it is. And I don't know. I don't want to change.
Yeah, I can see that. But I mean, for me, being able to tell stories with video and audio and text, I mean, I was all in. The whole multimedia necessities of telling stories with digital media, I was completely in on that. Of course, having the budget to shoot those videos and things like that were difficult. And I think for the sales team, if there was any, feet dragging, it was probably because, well, I know how to sell a full page 4-color ad in the print magazine. I'm a little bit not adept at selling a banner or a web program. I'm not talking about the early days, obviously.
Yeah. Well, they probably didn't see the benefit on their paycheck either. I mean, that's always a problem.
Yeah, because it's always, like anything else, a magazine has, you have your Gibsons or your Fenders who are probably going to put an ad in or 1 or 2 ads in a month. And, even regarding the print ad, it was difficult if you have new players come in the field, because it would always be, well, now I have to call Schecter Guitar and tell them who we are, and where I can just have Fender sign an IO, an insertion order, and I'm done. I've made my money. So my return on investment with Fender is scads better than working on a new account. Although I'm not saying every salesperson dragged their feet, but I can see that given even that on the print side of things, and now, okay, we need you to understand how to sell digital advertising. And I'm not even sure that the parent companies found the right consultants to really teach our sales teams how to do that effectively. So we kind of had this almost perfect storm of not having the investment or or let's face it, the consultants on the editorial side. Here's some things that really resonate and produce engagement. You should check this out. It's going to cost you this. This is what you got to do. And then on the ad sales side, this is how you sell a digital program. You need to do this, this, and this. This is what the editors have to do to back it up. And there you go. And then, so there was that. And then on the other side, well, not the other side, but the other thing that was a bummer was as the revenue started heading downstream, the whole paranoia about how to relate to manufacturers just became huge. Please don't say anything bad about this product. They'll pull their ads.
Oh, so the traditional conflict between editorial and publishing?
Yeah, the traditional one. Yeah. And they didn't ask us to change anything. I mean, it never got some dictatorship or to save the magazine, you can't say what you really mean. Although it was kind of hysterical. I mean, I think some of the public didn't trust the magazine's reviews of products, because if you took advertising, you were working for the manufacturers anyway. So it didn't matter what we did, nobody was going to trust us. Right. But I've always told people, it's like, I absolutely trusted my editors, and if they said something was not right, I would support them. Of course, we're also looking at a manufacturing community that, when you and I started playing guitars, you could buy a really crappy guitar. By the time we're in the 2000s, it's like you'd have to work hard to buy a crappy guitar.
That's right.
Because manufacturing was, so there wasn't a lot to say. But I did get things like from the sales team, hey, if we did a little buyer's guide on acoustic amps, we could sell the crap out of that. And to my, I was a little sad, as a punk rocker who thumbed his nose at authority of all types, I was kind of not happy with myself for giving in to that. I kind of felt like, well, if it will help them sell ads, I know we're challenged as far as revenue to keep the health of the magazine, to keep my editors from being laid off. Yes, maybe we should try some of this stuff. But on the outside of it, I don't think that ever worked. I don't think that the sales team got the extra advertising they were looking at, because they also didn't have feet on the ground. I could go, well, how many good acoustic amps do people really want to know about this stuff? Well, yeah, it's the unplugged thing. Of course they want to know this stuff. And it would be like, well, some do, some don't. I think there always has to be some kind of a natural, enthusiastic approach to that. Not that I don't think the manufacturers were silly for putting these products out, and of course we should cover them, but doing something as calculated as, we'll just put specs and prices for 10 acoustic amps, I think the community saw right through that. The community of players, I mean. So I don't think we did any good for the manufacturers, and I don't think we did any good for the guitar community. All we did was make the advertising people happy. And I don't even think they were happy because they didn't get the ads they were looking for.
Well, so was it, that really sounds like what we just used to call, or probably still do, a special advertising section. I mean, those things are sometimes get into gray areas, do they not?
Well, except we didn't call it that.
No, of course you didn't. But some people might look at it and say, well, that's really what it is. You just didn't put the header up at the top.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think those are stuff changes. You can't sit there and cry. I saw an interview with William Shatner, who's like 87. I mean, just a couple of days ago, and riding horses competitively at 87 years old. And he said, listen, you can't stop change. I just always said yes to the opportunity. I never sat down and said, no, I'm not happy with the way things are going. So, I can't sit around and go, disruption happened in the publishing industry. Why couldn't it have not changed? Because that's not possible. But if there were two elements that I think that I and those around me didn't effectively marshal our forces around, it was the decline of print advertising and the decline of the publishing industry in general, and also the rise of digital and, embracing ways to make that happen.
So not on it quick enough. And I think I understand that. And they were not alone. I had another question. It's kind of off on its own, and it may have almost no relevance to anything, but there were obviously other magazines in the group.
Yep.
And I'm just kind of wondering, was there any integration or communication or working together with you guys in these other magazines? Was there any reason to? Was there any sharing of anything at all? Any interaction?
Well, the California books, as I like to say, I was editorial director over all of them. So we had guitar player, bass player, electronic musician, which was ironically enough bought by Nube, and keyboard magazine.
Sure. Okay.
So, I didn't want to be an invasive manager of those things, and we always had good editors that were leading those products, those brands. But we did share knowledge where appropriate, because of course I was over them all, and we had a lot of good writers and a lot of good editors that can share best practices and things like that. When Nube bought Guitar World magazine, the culture of that magazine, since we had always been competitors, it was always a little bit standoffish. So we didn't really share data like we probably could have. And when Brad Talinsky, who was at the time the editor of that magazine, was actually put over me and the California books as editorial director of that team, and he was delightful to work with. He was a really smart guy, but even he really couldn't make the synergy happen like maybe it could have.
Oh.
I don't know if it would have solved anything anyway, the way the business was going, but we didn't really have the synergy that I think we all would have liked.
Yes, there's been a lot of corporate shuffling, a lot of companies selling and buying each other, and consolidation and divestitures, and you name it. There's just a lot of that, and it continues to go on.
Well, also not even, it's a weird thing to think about, but if you're old school magazine and you're getting print ad dollars, which are expensive, then I think you can afford to have staffs and things like that. When you're digital, just look at the way things are in the, even with successful digital brands. It's like, you look at, they don't really pay the writers that much, or people work for free, or they curate data. It's almost like I think we're still trying to figure out, okay, the disruption happened, but if we're going to have editors driving a brand and it's a digital brand, how do we bring in enough revenue to pay these people the wages that they should get?
Yeah.
I don't think everybody in the industry has figured that out. I'm not going to say there's not any brand out there that doesn't have a staff of 10 or 12 or 15 or 20 awesome editors, but I do see a lot of editors working on multiple products or multiple projects. I see a lot of freelancers who find it hard to get a meaningful wage for their stories. Huffington Post doesn't pay people for the most part to turn in their, their articles. So And I can't tell you how many times the business has come to me and said, "Why can't we have that model? Why do we have to pay these guys to write for us?
Yeah.
Aren't they going to be happy that they're promoting their own brand?" And it's like, no one is going to review a guitar or a keyboard or a recording device for nothing.
Yeah. There has to be a win-win. In one form or another. There has to be enough.
Nice.
There has to be enough. There has to be some kind of a value transfer going both ways. And that can be defined a lot of different ways, but it still has to happen. And
Sure.
And it has to be mutually beneficial. And that's such a basic thing.
Well, of course, and you can say yes, right? I could have gotten people to write for free, but would the quality have been the level that, our community is expecting? Since that never happened, I don't know if that would have been right or wrong, but my whether it was ill-founded or not, my stance was, no, we're not going to get people who are as good as the people that I'm paying.
Yeah. Well, I think that makes a lot of sense. So you had a long career at Guitar Player, 2 decades plus.
Yeah.
But as many of our listeners know, but probably many don't know, that has come to an end.
Yep.
And I had to confess to you the other day that I was so busy in my own world that I didn't realize that had happened until somebody had told me. And, we've, well, you and I both have had that experience. So I'm just kind of wondering, I would just call this a completion. And it's a good way to look at it. It's like marriages. Sometimes our relationships are completed. Mm-hmm. It's a little more positive way to look at it. You did it. You did it for a long time. You had a lot of accomplishments, mm-hmm. and it's done. And now, it's time for something else. Is there anything that you want to talk about in terms of kind of how that came about? Were you surprised? Was it time? What do you think would be valuable to share with our listeners who know you and know of all the great work that you've done? I've certainly seen comments.
Well, it's nice to say that.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of comments in forums and places where people have said a lot of really nice things and just raising a lot of concern about, why that had happened and, what was going to happen next. That's always the topic of conversation. Well, now what's going to happen? So what thoughts would you like to share with us?
Well, I'll be completely transparent. Future bought Nube Media. They bought all the enthusiast books like Guitar World, Guitar Player, et cetera, and they bought all the business-to-business magazines. Nube had quite a catalog of business-to-business magazines, government video, stuff like that. So whenever that happens, you never know. Am I going to have a job? Am I not going to have a job? It's just the way of the world. But the weird thing for, I think, the editors of the consumer books was we would have meetings with the future directors, and they would say, "Hey, we really believe in print. We really believe in these brands. We're gonna, things are gonna be better." So we were lulled into. We're still, you still look behind your back, but okay, well, maybe this is gonna work out. So I went to Poland on May 1st to do this Jimi Hendrix festival that I always do out there. And I got a call before I sat down to dinner, with some Polish friends. And, that some guy from Future goes, "Well, I have to have a difficult discussion with you. You're being made redundant."
You're being made redundant.
Yeah. So I kind of went, all right, this is a surprise. And he goes, "Yeah, we didn't realize when we took over the books how bad the financials were on these magazines.
Oh, so
we would have to close magazines if we didn't take a drastic step." So at that point, I'm thinking it's just me. And I found out a couple of days later when my phone started blowing up, I'm still in Poland, that they got rid of Jeff Kitz, who was the editor-in-chief of Guitar World. They took care of Paul Haggard, who was the longtime and awesome art director of Guitar Player and Bass Player. Got rid of the art director from Keyboard, and it was like a wholesale bloodletting. I like to say that, from the Wall Street movie, that we were Gordon Gekko'd.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And also, Future, they bought the company. They can do whatever they want. I don't. I don't disparage them or look down at them. I'm not mad at them. I think it probably could have been a little more honest and transparent from the get-go. I have to admit, whether this gets me in trouble or not, that I didn't really believe the fact that the financials were that bad. Because after all, I'm a company officer. I saw the T&E reports every month. And while you could make the argument that a certain magazine wasn't making as much money as it could, it's not like, there was mass losses of money going on in the player group. So it's kind of like, all right, well, if that's what you want to say to the industry, okay, but they really didn't even say that to the industry. And I think the reason that you didn't know and some people didn't know was that they didn't really make an announcement to anybody.
No, there wasn't a lot of news. I mean, I searched for news and it's hard to find.
Yeah. Well, I mean, why would you do that? You're basically, shooting a bunch of respected editors and company people in the head that have marshaled these books for years. And it's like, I can see why Future wouldn't want to take, wouldn't want to put that out like with a bat signal. Hey, look what we did.
Yeah. Because there'd be some backlash for sure.
Yeah. So I still do some work for them. It took them a while to find somebody to take my place. Christopher Scapoletti, who used to work for me as GP's social networking and web editor, took the job. And I love Chris, and he's a smart person and a wonderful editor. So the magazine's in good hands, but he's not left with an awesome budget to move forward. Seems like Future is very sensitive to expenses and things like that. So no matter what he does, this is my own personal opinion, so I want to say that right out front. I don't think that he'll have the resources to be able to make Guitar Player what it has always been.
Yeah. Well,
they've already made a move on Bass Player magazine where they pretty much subsumed it into Future's UK magazine, which is called Bass Guitar.
Oh.
And they said that they still want to have 20%. I mean, they're still going to publish Bass Player magazine, but it will basically be a lot of the British content along with 20% of US content.
Oh, well, that's interesting.
And that magazine is, I'm sure, ably managed by somebody in Britain. But once again, that's not the same thing as having the U.S. bass player editors who have lived in that community, played bass, and evangelized bass guitar, and decided based on their standing in the community what artists to cover and things like that. That doesn't happen when you only have 20% of the content.
Yeah.
So the personality of these brands has absolutely changed with the Future acquisition.
I guess time will just tell, and that will tell us a lot of things. And that sort of leads me to kind of my final point of discussion as we're kind of running toward the end of time, toward the end of our time.
Yeah. I apologize. I have an Italian mouth, so if I've gone on, I apologize.
No. We're right on.
To an editor, what the hell's going on here?
Yeah, we're right on schedule. But it seems to me that as I said, that I thought that this was completion. Sounds like a new phase for Michael Molenda. So I guess I want to just kind of get your overall view of where you think the music industry media is and where it's going. But even more importantly, what's on the path forward for you? And I guess it sounds like a two-part question, but second part is probably more important.
Well, I think like with any industry, if you're going to be especially an enthusiast industry, people love playing guitar, bass, keyboards. They love home recording. Musicians love being musicians. It's a labor of love. It's not something you get into 100% because you're going to make money, because the challenges are going to be absolutely frightening, and not everybody gets to make a living playing music. So if you look at the spreadsheet a little too much and go, well, we can cut this back and that back and blah, 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 and still get the data out there. We could curate stuff. We could let other people, the idea of a brand and a leader of a brand evangelizing that brand it gets more difficult to have that happen. So I admit this is one of the few grandpa views of the world that I allow myself to have. But, I always love the fact that, the editor of a magazine was somebody that you looked at and said, okay, that person, be it a man or a woman, is leading the content. and I'm in. I love what this person has got to say about guitar or cars or fashion or architecture. So I'm in. As if the personality of these brands starts getting subsumed by financial constraints, and it's easier to curate news by a robot or curate news for freebies in exchange for putting your name on a website, it just seems like, all right, I can't help but see a loss of the quality of journalism that, I grew up with.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that a 20-year-old person or a 15-year-old person is wrong for not caring about it. I'm just sad about it.
Yeah.
And like I said, I admitted this is one of the few grandpa views of the world I allow myself, that, I want to be sad about the nature of, and of course, we're seeing it now in straight news. I mean, we're threatened on every level. Like, what is news? What's the truth? What should people trust? What should they not trust? Who should be trusted? When you get celebrity involved in this stuff, it gets all skewed, and
it's become it's not really news anymore. But I mean, I get it. I have a lot of those same moments myself. I try to limit them only just from a practicality standpoint. But what about you, Mike? What do you see going forward?
One of the things I can thank Future for is if we spent a lot of time developing communities that love guitar player, bass player, keyboard, and EM, that love the type of journalism that we provided for those communities. And that is now probably not going to happen because Future has a different business plan than Nube did, or Guitar Player Magazine in general. Then I am super jazzed and happy to take that mantle myself. So I'm starting a website and a business called guardiansofguitar.com. Having a lot of the guitar player writers. I just had a discussion today with the bass player team about possibly adding, bass data to that and joining together in kind of a guitar and bass, company to provide, the bass community with the kind of information that they've been used to. Because I don't think they're going to get it out of bass guitar if only 20% of the content's going to be American anyway. And certainly, I'm really looking forward to, we'll see how it works out, but I think that I owe something back to the community that supported me for 20 years. I know that it's not just my ego working here, because I've gotten emails and awesome texts and letters and, Facebook posts about people who were happy about what we did at Guitar Player and are worried about where it's going to go. And I just feel like I really need to serve those people, to continue to serve those people by doing it myself.
It's a great motive. What about your playing? I mean, you're still playing?
Oh yeah. I've got this band, The Trouble with Monkeys, that kind of does high energy, punked up versions of Monkeys songs. That's
great.
I never lost, my passion and enthusiasm for guitar playing. And while if my 20-year-old self saw my 62-year-old self on stage, I would probably go, dude, Grandpa, get off stage. You do not belong in my house. Get out of here. But as a 62-year-old, I'm so happy that, audiences are still okay with seeing an older person acting like a 20-year-old. Thank goodness.
Well, I'm still telling people I'm in the throes of middle age, and I'm determined to stay there until I absolutely can't.
Yeah. Well, my altar is Link Ray. That guy was still making loud, crazy music in his late 70s. So
sure. And
I'm figuring, thanks, Link. If you can do it, I'm right behind you.
And some of them are going to be in their 80s, and they're going to still be doing it. And there are a few who are, as we know.
It just comes down to the love of the instrument. I can't stop. I can't stop. It's not an ego thing. I literally can't stop. I can't breathe if I don't play guitar every day.
Well, then it's in your blood.
It's in somewhere.
Mike, I really want to thank you for taking the time on late on a Friday. I know where you're at. I won't tell anybody where you're at, but you're lounging down in the desert someplace in 130 degree temperature. But I know we're going to want to stay in touch and hear more about what's going on with you. And I'm sure we'll have plenty of things to talk about down the road. But I really, again, want to thank you for coming on and hope we can do this again real soon.
Sure. And I just want to thank you. It's an awesome show. I really appreciated all the research that you did to make it, a deep interview. I mean, that's almost become a lost art these days. So I just want to salute you for putting all the work in, to interview an old, fired editor.
Well, that's one way to look at it.
Thank you very much.
We're not going to look at it. So let's stay in touch. Be well. Have a great weekend.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, here we are at the back of the show again, where if you made it this far, you're probably willing to gamble on unpredictable topics and discussion that you might not expect on a guitar-related show. We always say that. So what did you think about the interview with Michael Molenda? We're interested to hear from you, and you can comment on the official episode page on our website or on Facebook and Twitter at Guitar Business, or email us directly from the contact page on our website at guitarbusinessradio.com. And if you have none of those capabilities, you can always place a phone call to us at 888-777-2404 and press 2 for the GBR hotline. So here's my take on it. Because of my own history in both the guitar world and the publishing industry, and many years as a magazine publisher, Mike and I have a lot of common experiences in the business, which made it even more interesting for me. But let's face it, most of you listening to this show have read at least some or even many issues of Guitar Player magazine in the last 2 decades, and if so, it's likely that you were somewhere between subliminally and keenly aware of Mike's contribution and influence on the magazine. It would have been hard to miss. But this corporate shuffling business has been going on for a long time now, and as Mike also indicated, the effects of which are often unpredictable. Many of us, including myself, have been shuffled out of good positions where we made a substantial contribution over many years for reasons that are often purposely not clear. But one thing that has become clear to me as I've gotten a bit older, as it is with so many things, there's usually a bigger, much more important reason that this sort of thing happens. And while trying not to trip the old cliche alarm, when we step away from the obvious disruption caused by a seemingly negative event such as this, it's a lot easier to be open to all the new avenues and opportunities that may appear as a result, and allow us to grow and move on to better things. Of course, it's rarely without some challenges or bumps in the road, but the simple and important thing we need to remember is to keep moving forward. I'm sure I've said this before, but I often refer to the notion of this or something better. This or something better. It's something like an affirmation of sorts, and it's really easy to invoke. It's a very quick and simple way to be reassured that if something isn't quite working out as planned, well, that simply means that something better is trying to emerge in its place. Of course, you have to believe that. It doesn't happen just by saying it. You must also believe it. And sometimes that takes a little time and some positive experiences, but the more you do it, the easier it is. So I really appreciate Mike coming on the show and laying this all out for us and sharing a lot of personal stuff. There's a lot of great work there to be proud of and a lot of good lessons there for the rest of us. And about the only other thing I can add to all of that is to encourage each of you to stay positive, stay focused on the destination, but always keep all the options open on how you're going to get there. As always, thanks for listening, and I'll see you again on episode 33. And that's it for this episode of Guitar Business Radio. Thanks for being with us. You can stay tuned and stay in touch at guitarbusinessradio.com.